With just $4,000 between her and homelessness, Amara Thompson is counting down the days until eviction when she makes a decision that will change everything. She scolds a wealthy stranger in an exclusive Los Angeles park for neglecting a crying child. Not knowing the quiet Korean man in the expensive suit is one of the most dangerous crime bosses in the city. His bodyguards reach for their weapons, but Park Jin-woo does something unexpected. He offers her a job. At 26, Amara had built a reputation as one of the most dedicated professional nannies in Los Angeles, the kind of caregiver wealthy families competed to hire, the woman who treated every child like they were her own. She had worked for 5 years with impeccable references, building a career she was genuinely proud of, a career that honored her Kenyan grandmother's teachings about the sacred responsibility of caring for children. Her natural hair was styled in elegant braids that framed her face, accentuating warm brown eyes that seemed to see straight into a child's heart, and her tall, graceful frame moved with the easy confidence of someone who knew her worth and her calling. She was driven by a genuine love for children that went beyond paychecks, beyond convenience, beyond the comfort of turning away when something was wrong. That dedication had cost her everything 3 weeks ago. The Westwood family had been her most prestigious placement, a tech executive's household in Brentwood, with 2 young children and more money than sense. When Amara discovered the mother leaving the 3-year-old alone in the bathtub for 20-minute stretches while she took business calls, when she found the 5-year-old locked in his room as punishment for normal childhood energy, she had done what her conscience demanded. She reported the neglect to Child Protective Services, documented everything carefully, stood by her testimony even when the family's lawyers tried to intimidate her into recanting. The children were safe now, placed with better guardians, but Amara's career was destroyed. The Westwoods were connected, influential, and vindictive. Word spread through the tight-knit network of wealthy Los Angeles families. The nanny who reported her employers, who broke the unspoken code of discretion, who chose children's welfare over her own career security. No agency would place her. No family would hire her. 3 weeks of searching had yielded nothing but polite rejections and doors closing in her face. Now she was doing temporary childcare gigs through apps, last-minute babysitting for families who needed someone immediately and didn't check references too carefully. Work that paid barely enough to cover her grandmother's assisted living expenses and left nothing for her own survival. The eviction notice had arrived 5 days ago, 10 days to vacate her small apartment in Koreatown, and she had exactly $4,200 in her account. She needed $8,000 minimum to avoid homelessness and keep her 78-year-old grandmother in the decent facility where she currently lived, where the staff knew her name and treated her with dignity, where Amara could visit without fear. The math was simple and terrifying. She was out of time and running out of options. If you have ever been in a situation where you had to choose between doing what was right and protecting yourself, drop a comment below and let me know what state or city you are from. Sometimes standing up for others costs us everything, but we do it anyway because some things matter more than security. The Wednesday afternoon temp job had seemed straightforward enough. 6 hours watching 2 well-behaved children at Hancock Park, one of Los Angeles's most exclusive neighborhoods where old money-built estates behind iron gates and manicured hedges. The children's mother wanted time for a spa appointment and shopping, was paying $40 an hour cash, and specifically requested someone who could handle an upscale public setting without embarrassment. Amara arrived in her most professional outfit, introduced herself to the children with her usual warmth, and settled into the pleasant routine of outdoor play at the neighborhood's private park. The park itself was beautiful in the way that only serious wealth could create, with custom playground equipment that probably cost more than most cars, perfectly maintained lawns, strategically placed shade trees, and discreet security cameras mounted at every corner. Other nannies and caregivers dotted the space, watching their charges with varying degrees of attention, while expensive cars lined the surrounding streets, sleek German sedans and Italian sports cars catching the afternoon sunlight. Amara was pushing the 5-year-old on the swings when she first noticed the small boy crying on the bench. He looked about 4 years old, small for his age perhaps, with dark hair and delicate Asian features that were currently twisted in misery as tears streamed down his flushed cheeks. He was clearly overheated, his light blue shirt damp with sweat, his little hands clutching a worn stuffed rabbit as he sobbed with the desperate, exhausted quality of a child who had been crying for a long time without comfort. What made Amara's professional instincts flare with concern was not just the crying child, but the complete lack of response from the adults nearby. 3 men in dark suits stood at careful distances from the bench, their postures alert and watchful, their eyes scanning the park with professional vigilance that marked them clearly as private security or bodyguards. They were close enough to intervene if anyone approached the child, but far enough that they clearly had no intention of providing actual care or comfort. They watched the crying boy the way guards watch valuable property, with attention but no affection, no movement toward helping. And sitting on the adjacent bench, close enough to hear every heartbroken sob, sat a tall Korean man in his 30s who appeared to be completely ignoring the child's distress. Amara watched for several minutes, hoping someone would respond, that the man would turn and offer comfort, that the bodyguards would at least provide water or shade. Nothing. The child cried, the men watched, and the expensive suit continued scrolling through his phone as if the sound of a suffering child was irrelevant background noise. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory, the teachings that had shaped her entire life and career. Children are sacred trust, Amara. When they cry and no one answers, when they hurt and no one cares, the world breaks a little. You fix it when you can, even when it costs you. Especially when it costs you. She settled her 2 charges safely at the sandbox with strict instructions to stay put, then walked directly toward the crying child, her professional concern overriding any hesitation about interfering with someone else's family. As she approached, one of the bodyguards shifted position slightly, his hand moving toward his jacket in a gesture that would have been alarming if Amara had been paying attention to anything other than the distressed little boy. She knelt beside the bench, making herself small and non-threatening, and spoke softly to the child in the gentle voice she had perfected over 5 years of professional childcare. "Hey there, sweetheart. You look really hot and sad. My name is Amara. What's your name?" The boy's crying hitched slightly, his dark eyes focusing on her face with surprise that anyone had spoken to him directly. He didn't answer, but he didn't pull away either, which Amara took as permission to continue. She pulled a water bottle from her bag, the cold one she had been saving for herself, and offered it carefully. "Would you like some water? It's really warm today, and I bet you're thirsty." Small hands reached for the bottle with desperate need, and Amara helped him drink slowly, mindful of how quickly overheated children could make themselves sick by gulping too fast. As the child drank, his crying began to slow, the immediate physical need being met, allowing some of the emotional distress to ease. She pulled a small pack of tissues from her bag next, gently wiping the tears and sweat from his flushed face, murmuring soft reassurances the entire time. "You are okay now. You are safe. I have got you." Once the child was calmer, water consumed and tears slowing to occasional hiccups, Amara turned her attention to the man on the adjacent bench who had still not looked up from his phone, who had made no move to care for this obviously distressed child who was clearly under his supervision based on the bodyguard's positioning. Professional rage, the kind that had cost her career once before, flooded through her system hot and righteous. She stood, positioned herself directly in the man's line of sight, and spoke with the firm clarity of someone who had nothing left to lose. "Excuse me. That little boy has been crying for at least 15 minutes. He was overheated, thirsty, and clearly in distress. I do not know what your relationship is to him, but ignoring a child's basic needs is neglectful and cruel. Children are not accessories to be displayed and then ignored. They are human beings who deserve care and attention, especially from the adults responsible for them." The park went very quiet very quickly. The bodyguards moved with sudden coordinated precision, hands now visibly on concealed weapons, bodies shifting to surround Amara in a formation that was unmistakably threatening. Other nannies and caregivers in the park suddenly found reasons to move their charges to different areas, creating empty space around the confrontation. Amara's heart hammered against her ribs as she realized she might have just made a catastrophic mistake, but she held her ground, chin lifted, meeting the man's eyes directly. He finally looked up from his phone, and Amara felt the full weight of his attention like a physical thing. Park Jinwoo at 34 was a study in controlled intensity, every line of his body radiating the kind of power that came not from displays of strength, but from the absolute certainty that strength would never need to be displayed. He was dressed in a dark, impeccably tailored suit that probably cost more than Amara made in 3 months, the kind of custom work that whispered wealth rather than shouted it, perfectly pressed despite the warm afternoon. His features were sharp and sculpted, high cheekbones and a strong jawline that gave his face an almost severe quality. Dark hair swept back from his forehead with precision, not a strand out of place. But it was his eyes that made Amara's breath catch, dark and bottomless and completely unreadable. The eyes of a man who had seen terrible things and done worse, who missed nothing and forgot less. His presence created weight in the air, a heaviness that made the sunny park feel suddenly shadowed, and Amara understood with cold clarity that she was facing someone genuinely dangerous, someone for whom her scolding was not embarrassing, but potentially fatal depending on his mood. One of the bodyguards spoke in rapid Korean, his tone urgent, clearly asking permission to remove her, possibly permanently. The man in the expensive suit raised one hand in a small gesture, and every bodyguard froze instantly, weapons disappearing back into concealment, bodies relaxing fractionally while remaining alert. He stood slowly, unfolding from the bench with economical grace, and moved close enough that Amara had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle with notes of cedar and something darker. His voice when he finally spoke was quiet, almost gentle, with only the slightest accent shaping his perfect English. "What is your name?" "Amara," she replied, proud that her voice remained steady despite the fear flooding her system. "Your full name?" "Amara Thompson." "Occupation?" "Professional nanny," she said, then added with bitter honesty, "Currently unemployed." Something flickered in those dark eyes. Interest perhaps, or calculation. He glanced at the small boy who was now watching the adults with wide, frightened eyes, then back to Amara. "You know nothing about my family or my situation, yet you chose to interfere and criticize how I handle my business." "Children are not business," Amara snapped back, her protective instincts overriding survival sense. "They are human beings who need care and love and attention. That little boy was suffering, and you sat 3 feet away doing nothing." He tilted his head slightly, studying her with the focused attention of a predator assessing prey. But there was something else in his expression now, something that might have been respect or curiosity. "What would you have done differently?" "I would have noticed he was crying, for starters. Offered water, moved him to shade, asked what was wrong, provided comfort. Basic child care that anyone responsible for a child should know. And if I told you that child has not responded positively to anyone in 6 months, has barely eaten or spoken, has rejected every caregiver and most family members, would you still think comfort is so simple?" Amara looked at the small boy, really looked, and saw what she had missed in her initial assessment. The child was not just hot and tired. He was withdrawn, hollow-eyed, holding that stuffed rabbit like a lifeline, his small body radiating the kind of trauma that came from profound loss. She knew that look, had seen it in foster children, in kids who had survived terrible things and did not know how to trust safety anymore. Her voice gentled. "Then he needs someone who will try anyway, who will sit with him every day and offer comfort even if he does not accept it yet, who will be patient and consistent until he learns it is safe to trust again. Ignoring him will not help him heal." Park Jinwoo reached into his jacket, a movement that made the bodyguards tense again, but he only pulled out a business card, expensive card stock with minimal information printed in clean black font. He held it out to Amara, and she took it automatically, her fingers brushing his briefly in the exchange. "I require someone with your specific skills and your fearlessness," he said quietly. "Call this number when you are ready to discuss employment terms." Then he turned to the small boy, scooped him up with surprising gentleness, and walked toward a black Mercedes sedan that Amara had not noticed before, bodyguards falling into formation around them. The child went with him without resistance, but without comfort either, a small passive weight in expensive arms. Amara stood in the sunlit park, holding a business card that read Park Jinwoo, Park Properties Development, with a phone number and nothing else, and tried to understand what had just happened. She looked down at the card, felt its quality between her fingers, and knew with absolute certainty that she had just encountered someone far outside her normal world, someone wealthy and powerful and possibly very dangerous. She should throw the card away. She should forget this entire encounter and find some other solution to her financial crisis. But she slipped the card into her pocket anyway, her fingers closing around it like it might be a lifeline or a trap, possibly both, and returned to the two children she was actually being paid to watch, her mind already spinning with questions she could not answer and choices she was not ready to make. 3 days after the park encounter, Amara's carefully controlled world collapsed completely. The first temp agency dropped her Tuesday morning with a brief, apologetic email explaining that her services were no longer needed, that several clients had expressed concerns about her professionalism and judgment, that they wished her well in future endeavors. The second agency called an hour later with similar news, though their representative was less polite, suggesting that Amara should consider a different career path entirely given her apparent inability to maintain appropriate boundaries with clients. By Wednesday afternoon, all 4 agencies she worked with had severed their relationships, each citing vague complaints from unnamed wealthy families, each making it clear that her reputation had been systematically destroyed by someone with reach and influence. Amara sat in her small Koreatown apartment, surrounded by boxes she had already started packing, and felt the cold weight of genuine fear settle into her bones. 7 days until eviction. For $1,000 in her account. 0 income prospects. Her grandmother's assisted living facility had already called twice about next month's payment, their voices polite but firm, reminding her that spaces in quality memory care were competitive and late payments could result in relocation to less desirable accommodations. She pulled out her laptop and did what she should have done 3 days ago. She researched Park Jinwoo. The legitimate information came first, clean and professional and carefully curated. Park Properties Development was a major player in Los Angeles commercial real estate, with holdings throughout Southern California and expanding operations in Seattle and Las Vegas. Jinwoo was listed as CEO and primary shareholder. His professional biography, noting his education at UCLA and his successful expansion of the family business into legitimate development after inheriting control from his father. There were photos from charity events and business conferences, always the same controlled expression, the same expensive suits, the same aura of power carefully contained. But Amara had learned long ago that the cleanest public faces often hid the darkest private realities, and she knew how to dig deeper, how to find the whispers that lived in the spaces between official statements. The forums and community boards told a different story, careful language from people who clearly knew more than they were willing to state directly. References to the Park family's influence in Koreatown and beyond, suggestions about their involvement in import-export businesses that had nothing to do with real estate, respectful fear in how people discussed them. One comment on a Los Angeles crime blog stood out, posted by someone claiming to be a former prosecutor. The Park family runs half the Korean organized crime in Southern California. Jinwoo took over after his father died and proved himself even more ruthless and strategic. You do not cross him. You do not even look at him wrong. People who forget that tend to disappear very quietly. Amara closed her laptop and sat in the silent apartment, heart hammering, understanding fully now what she had done 3 days ago. She had scolded a crime boss in public, criticized him in front of his bodyguards, challenged his authority over a child who was apparently his nephew. Any reasonable person would have been killed or at minimum severely beaten for such disrespect. Instead, he had given her a business card and suggested employment. She pulled the card from her wallet where she had tucked it, expensive paper stock with raised lettering, minimal and elegant. She thought about the way he had looked at her, the weight of his attention, the strange flicker of what might have been respect when she refused to back down. She thought about how gently he had picked up the crying child despite his earlier neglect, how the bodyguards had frozen at his smallest gesture, how much power radiated from him in waves. She thought about her eviction notice, her grandmother's facility, her destroyed career and blacklisted reputation. Every rational instinct screamed at her to throw the card away, to find some other solution, to avoid entanglement with organized crime no matter how desperate her situation became. She could leave Los Angeles entirely, start over somewhere else, build a new career under a new reputation. She could take whatever work she could find, survive on the margins, keep herself and her grandmother afloat through sheer determination and pride. But pride did not pay rent. Pride did not keep elderly women in safe, clean facilities with staff who remembered their names. Pride would not save her, and she was tired of pretending it would. Amara picked up her phone before she could talk herself out of it and dialed the number on the card. A woman answered on the second ring, her voice professional and crisp with only a hint of Korean accent. Park Properties Development. How may I direct your call? My name is Amara Thompson. I am calling for Park Jinwoo. He asked me to contact him about a potential employment opportunity. There was a brief pause, the sound of keyboard typing. Then the woman's voice returned slightly warmer. Yes, Miss Thompson. Mr. Park has been expecting your call. Are you available for a meeting this evening at 6? This evening, Amara repeated, thrown by the immediacy. Mr. Park prefers not to delay once decisions are made. The address is 523 West 6th Street, Park Properties Building, top floor. Please arrive promptly. The dress code is professional business attire. The line disconnected before Amara could ask any questions, leaving her holding her phone and wondering what she had just agreed to. 5 hours later, she stood in front of a gleaming high-rise in downtown Los Angeles, 50 stories of steel and glass reflecting the evening sun. The Park Properties logo discreet but prominent near the main entrance. Security was visible but understated, well-dressed men positioned at strategic points, cameras covering every angle. This was serious wealth, serious power, presented with the kind of polish that came from generations of practice at appearing legitimate while being anything but. Amara wore her best interview suit, navy blue and professionally tailored, though nothing like the custom work Jinwoo had been wearing in the park, her braids styled elegantly, minimal jewelry, her entire appearance calculated to project competence and professionalism. She needed this meeting to go well, needed whatever he was offering even as she feared what accepting might cost. The elevator was private, requiring a key card that the lobby security provided after confirming her appointment, and it opened directly into a reception area that took up half of the top floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed Los Angeles spreading out in every direction, the city glittering in the early evening light, and the space itself was decorated in minimalist luxury. All clean lines and expensive materials, leather and dark wood, and subtle Asian influences in the art and furniture placement. A young Korean woman in an immaculate dress greeted her, led her through the reception area to a heavy wooden door, knocked twice, then opened it, and gestured for Amara to enter. The office beyond was even more impressive than the reception area, a massive space with windows on two sides, a desk that looked hand-carved from a single piece of dark wood, furniture arranged for both business meetings and private conversations. Everything was precisely placed, expensive but not ostentatious, projecting power through quality rather than quantity. Park Jinwoo sat behind the desk in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent, and he looked up as she entered with the same dark, unreadable eyes that had assessed her in the park. He did not stand or offer greeting, simply gestured to the chair across from his desk with the kind of economical movement that conveyed absolute authority. Sit, Miss Thompson. Amara sat, grateful that her legs were shaking only slightly, and met his gaze with as much confidence as she could project. He studied her for a long moment, then spoke with the same quiet voice she remembered, each word precisely chosen. You researched me after our encounter. What did you learn? That you are extremely wealthy and extremely dangerous, Amara replied honestly. That your family's business interests extend well beyond real estate. That challenging you in public should have resulted in consequences far worse than a job offer. The corner of his mouth lifted fractionally, not quite a smile, but close. Yet you came anyway. Why? Because I am out of options and you know it. You made sure of it. His expression did not change, but something shifted in his eyes, acknowledgement perhaps. You are correct. I had your temp agencies contacted, your reputation quietly damaged. I wanted to see if desperation would drive you to me, or if pride would keep you away. You came, which demonstrates intelligence rather than weakness. Survival instinct is valuable. So this was a test, Amara said, anger flaring hot despite her vulnerability. Everything is a test, Miss Thompson. How you respond to difficulty, how you prioritize, what choices you make when options narrow. You chose to protect a child you did not know despite professional risk. You chose to challenge authority when you believed a child was being neglected. You chose to call me despite understanding at least partially what I am. These choices tell me what I need to know about your character. And what do you need to know about my character for a nanny position? Jinwoo leaned back in his chair, his dark eyes never leaving her face. The child you confronted me about is my nephew, Park Minjun. He is 4 years old. 6 months ago, his mother, my younger sister, was killed by a rival organization. Minjun witnessed her death. Since that day, he has barely spoken, refuses to eat properly, rejects comfort from everyone. We have employed 5 professional nannies, each highly credentialed, each unsuccessful. He responds to no one, trusts no one, allows no one close. Amara felt her heart constrict at the image of a small child trapped in that kind of trauma. Until you, Jinwoo continued. In the park, he accepted water from you. He allowed you to touch his face, wipe his tears. He calmed under your care within minutes. That has not happened with anyone since my sister's death. You have something he needs, something none of the expensive professionals could provide. What is that? Jinwoo's gaze was intense, unwavering. Genuine care that cannot be faked or bought. The ability to see a child suffering and respond with pure protective instinct rather than professional detachment. Minjun can sense the difference, and he responded to you because you were not trying to do a job. You were trying to help him. So you want to hire me to care for your nephew. I want to hire you to save him, Jinwoo corrected quietly. To give him what I cannot, what money cannot buy, what professional credentials cannot provide. I need someone who will fight for him the way you fought for him in that park, challenging anyone who fails him, including me. The office was very quiet, just the subtle hum of climate control and the distant sounds of the city far below. Amara took a breath, steadied herself, and asked the question that mattered most. What are you offering, and what is the price? Jinwoo opened a folder on his desk, slid a document across to her, the movement precise and deliberate. The terms are as follows. $175,000 per year, paid monthly, legally reported and taxed through Park Properties payroll. Full medical and dental benefits for you and any dependents. Live-in position at my private estate in Bel Air with private quarters, separate wing, your own space. Your grandmother's current assisted living arrangement will be upgraded to the highest level of memory care available, fully paid indefinitely, with private nursing staff, if needed. Your current apartment lease will be settled, debts cleared, credit repaired. You will have a vehicle provided for personal use and full security detail when traveling with Minjun. Amara's hands trembled as she picked up the document, scanning terms that seemed impossible, that represented more money and security than she had ever imagined having. In exchange, Jinwoo continued, his voice firm but not unkind. You will provide full-time care for Minjun with focus on his psychological healing and development. You will live on the estate, available at all hours, though you will have reasonable personal time and privacy. You will report only to me regarding Minjun's progress and needs. You will maintain absolute discretion about anything you see or hear regarding family business. You will be loyal to this family and specifically to Minjun's well-being above all other considerations. And you will never, under any circumstances, speak to anyone outside this household about the Park family's private affairs. What happens if I break those terms? Amara asked, her voice steady despite her fear. Jinwoo met her eyes with perfect calm. If you betray this family's trust or endanger Minjun through negligence or malice, the consequences will be permanent and irreversible. I protect what is mine, Miss Thompson, and I eliminate threats without hesitation. But I do not believe you will betray us, because everything I have learned about you suggests your loyalty, once given, is absolute. You are asking me to work for a criminal organization. I am asking you to care for a traumatized child, Jinwoo replied. You will never witness operational business, never participate in anything illegal, never be asked to compromise your integrity regarding Minjun's care. Your only concern will be his health, his happiness, his healing. The money I pay you comes from legitimate real estate holdings that are completely legal. But I will not pretend my family is conventional, and I cannot promise you will never see or hear things that make you uncomfortable. What I can promise is that you will be protected absolutely, that your grandmother will be safe and cared for regardless of what happens, and that Minjun needs you specifically. Amara looked down at the contract, at numbers that could change everything, at terms that felt simultaneously generous and like a cage closing around her future. She thought about her eviction notice, her grandmother's worried phone calls, the blacklisted reputation that Jinwoo had orchestrated specifically to bring her to this moment. She thought about the small boy in the park, crying without comfort, holding that stuffed rabbit like it was the only safe thing in his world. She thought about her own childhood after her mother died, how her grandmother had stepped in with fierce protective love, how that dedication had saved her life and shaped everything she became. She thought about sacred trusts and the responsibility of caring for children who had lost everything. This was wrong in so many ways. Accepting money from a crime boss, entering his world, becoming part of his household, compromising every principle she had about staying separate from illegal activities. If she accepted, she would be choosing security bought with dirty money, safety provided by dangerous men, a future built on foundations she could never fully trust. But refusing Mint Minjun would continue suffering, would be cared for by professionals who saw him as a job rather than a child in desperate need. Refusing Mint, her grandmother would be moved to a lower quality facility. Mint Amara would be homeless. Mint pride would destroy her while accomplishing nothing good. Maybe morality was a luxury she could not afford. Maybe sometimes doing the right thing meant accepting wrong circumstances to help someone more vulnerable than yourself. She met Jinwoo's dark eyes, saw the absolute certainty there that she would accept, that he had calculated every pressure point and knew exactly how desperate she was. He had manipulated her into this position deliberately, had destroyed her other options to force this choice. She should hate him for it. Instead, she heard herself say, "I have conditions of my own." Jinwoo tilted his head slightly, interest flickering across his controlled features. "I will never lie to Minjun," Amara stated firmly. Not about his mother, not about anything important. Children deserve truth appropriate to their understanding. "I will never participate in anything that harms him emotionally or physically, and if I believe he is being endangered, I reserve the right to leave and take appropriate action. My loyalty is to his well-being first, to you and your family second." Those terms are non-negotiable. For a long moment, Jinwoo simply looked at her, and Amara wondered if she had just destroyed her only chance at survival by demanding conditions from a man who clearly did not accept conditions from anyone. Then he smiled, a real smile that transformed his severe features into something almost warm, and extended his hand across the desk. "Your terms are acceptable, Miss Thompson. In fact, they are exactly what I hoped you would demand. A caregiver who puts the child first is precisely what Minjun needs. We have an agreement." Amara took his hand, felt the strength in his grip, the warmth of his skin, the finality of the gesture. She had just agreed to enter a world she did not understand, to work for a man who terrified and intrigued her equally, to care for a traumatized child in a household where violence was as common as wealth. She had just sold her future for security and the chance to help one small boy heal. Jinwoo released her hand and immediately picked up his phone, speaking in rapid Korean to someone on the other end, his tone commanding and precise. When he ended the call, he looked back at Amara with satisfaction. "Your grandmother's facility is being contacted now with authorization for immediate upgrade and full payment. Your landlord will receive settlement for your lease within the hour. A moving company will arrive at your apartment tomorrow morning at 8 to pack and transport your belongings to the estate. A car will pick you up at 7 tomorrow evening to bring you to your new home. Do you have any questions?" Amara had 1,000 questions, but only one seemed important in that moment. "Can I see Minjun before I officially start? I want him to remember me, to know I am coming." Jinwoo's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "He is at the estate now. I will arrange for you to visit briefly this evening after we conclude here. He should know his new guardian." "Not guardian," Amara corrected gently. "Friend. Someone who sees him and cares about him. The rest will come when he is ready." Jinwoo studied her with those dark, unreadable eyes, and Amara thought she saw approval there, maybe even respect. "Yes," he agreed quietly. "Friend first. Everything else will follow." As Amara stood to leave, contract signed and future irrevocably changed, she looked out at the city glittering below and wondered what she had just begun. what world she was entering, and whether caring for one traumatized child would be worth the price of becoming part of Park Jin-woo's dangerous, controlled, absolutely unforgiving world. She suspected she would find out very soon. The black Mercedes pulled through iron gates that opened silently at their approach, revealing a private road that wound upward through manicured landscaping designed to be beautiful and functional, every tree and shrub placed to provide both aesthetic appeal and strategic sight lines. Amara sat in the back seat, watching the estate reveal itself in the early evening light, and tried to control the anxiety fluttering in her chest. The Park estate was not merely a house. It was a fortress disguised as a luxury residence, nestled into the hills of Bel Air behind walls that looked decorative but were clearly reinforced, topped with cameras that tracked their progress up the drive, surrounded by security measures so subtle and pervasive that Amara only noticed them because she was specifically looking. The main structure blended traditional Korean architectural elements with California modern design, all clean lines and natural materials, dark wood and stone and expansive glass, creating something that felt both ancient and contemporary, powerful and elegant. Guards were visible at strategic points, professional men in dark suits with earpieces and the kind of alert posture that spoke to military or law enforcement training. Their presence a constant reminder that this beautiful property was designed for protection as much as comfort. The grounds themselves were immaculate, traditional Korean gardens with carefully placed rocks and water features blending into California native landscaping, koi ponds reflecting the evening sky, stone pathways leading to different areas of the property, everything precise and intentional and absolutely controlled. The car stopped at the main entrance where Jin-woo waited, still in his expensive suit though he had loosened his tie slightly, and Amara felt her breath catch at how perfectly he fit this environment, how completely he belonged in this world of calculated beauty and underlying danger. "Welcome to your new home," he said simply, gesturing for her to follow him inside. The interior matched the exterior's blend of cultures and purposes, with soaring ceilings and open spaces that felt simultaneously welcoming and impossible to secure, though Amara suspected there were panic rooms and reinforced structures hidden behind the beautiful architecture. The main living areas featured artwork that was clearly expensive and carefully chosen, furniture that balanced comfort with style, and everywhere the subtle signs of serious wealth, custom fixtures and rare materials, and the kind of quality that only unlimited resources could provide. Jin-woo led her through the main house to the east wing, down a hallway lined with photographs that Amara wanted to examine more closely later, and stopped at a set of double doors. "Your quarters," he explained, opening them to reveal a spacious suite that took Amara's breath away. The bedroom was larger than her entire previous apartment, decorated in soft neutrals with touches of deep blue and gold, featuring a massive bed, sitting area, work desk, and floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the estate's gardens. The attached bathroom was all marble and modern fixtures, with a soaking tub and separate shower, more luxury than Amara had ever experienced in her life. A smaller adjoining room was set up as a living area with comfortable furniture, bookshelves, and a small kitchenette for preparing simple meals or snacks. Everything was new, clearly prepared specifically for her arrival, decorated with careful attention to creating a space that felt both elegant and comfortable, a private sanctuary within the larger fortress. "This is too much," Amara said quietly, overwhelmed by the extravagance. Jinwoo's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his dark eyes. "You will be available to Minjun at all hours, living in my home, separated from your previous life entirely. You deserve space that feels like your own, not like a servant's quarters. This is your home now, Miss Thompson. You should be comfortable here." Before Amara could respond, a small sound drew her attention to the doorway, and she turned to see Minjun standing there, partially hidden behind one of the bodyguards, clutching the same worn stuffed rabbit she remembered from the park, his dark eyes watchful and uncertain. Amara immediately knelt to his level, making herself small and non-threatening, and smiled gently. "Hello, Minjun. Do you remember me from the park? My name is Amara, but you can call me whatever feels right to you." The child stared at her for a long moment, then looked up at his uncle with a question in his expression that he did not voice. Jinwoo moved to stand beside his nephew, one hand resting briefly on the small head with surprising tenderness. Amara is going to be staying with us, Jinwoo explained in English, his voice softer than Amara had heard it before. She is going to help take care of you, spend time with you, be your friend. Would you like to show her your room? Minjun considered this seriously, then nodded once and reached out to take Amara's hand with the kind of trust that made her heart ache, small fingers wrapping around hers with desperate need for connection despite obvious fear. The nursery wing was adjacent to Amara's quarters, accessible through a connecting door that could be left open or closed as needed, and it was unlike any child's room Amara had ever seen. The space was enormous, divided into different areas for sleeping, playing, and learning, decorated in soft colors with child-sized furniture and an overwhelming abundance of expensive toys that looked largely untouched. Everything was immaculate, organized, sterile in its perfection, more like a showroom than a living space where a real child played and laughed and made messes. Minjun led her to his bed where more stuffed animals sat in precise rows, clearly arranged by staff rather than child, and picked up the worn rabbit, holding it out to Amara with grave ceremony. "This is Toki," he whispered, the first words Amara had heard him speak, his voice small and scratchy from disuse. Amara accepted the rabbit with equal seriousness, examining it carefully, noting the patched ear and faded fur that spoke to years of love and comfort. "Toki is very special," she said gently. "Thank you for introducing us. Does Toki sleep with you every night?" Minjun nodded, then surprised her by climbing onto her lap, small body settling against hers with the kind of immediate trust that suggested desperate need for maternal comfort. Amara wrapped her arms around him carefully, feeling how small he was, how fragile, how much pain this little person carried in his young life. She looked up to find Jinwoo watching from the doorway, his expression carefully controlled, but something raw and vulnerable flickering in his dark eyes before he masked it. He nodded once to her, a gesture of approval or perhaps gratitude, then stepped back and disappeared, leaving her alone with Minjun to begin the real work of healing. The first full day was harder than Amara had anticipated. Minjun woke before dawn screaming from nightmares, and only her presence and soft singing calmed him enough to return to sleep. Breakfast was a battle of wills, the child refusing food until Amara sat beside him and made eating a game rather than a demand, turning each bite into a small victory celebrated with gentle praise. He would not engage with the expensive educational toys, would not respond to structured activities, would barely speak beyond 1 or 2 word answers when directly questioned. But he shadowed her constantly, small body always within arm's reach, dark eyes tracking her every movement with the kind of desperate attention that broke Amara's heart. He was terrified she would disappear the way his mother had, that safety was temporary and adults could not be trusted to stay. So Amara did not try to force engagement or demand responses. Instead, she simply existed in his space, creating a calm and consistent presence, reading aloud from picture books even when he did not seem to listen, singing softly while she organized his toys, talking to him in a gentle stream of consciousness about her own day, her own thoughts, creating a bubble of safety through steady, reliable presence. By evening, small progress emerged. Minjun allowed her to hold his hand during a walk through the gardens. He accepted food from her directly, even asked for seconds in a whisper so soft she almost missed it. When she suggested bath time, he went without resistance, and while she washed his hair and talked about how clean bubbles were making him, she thought she saw the ghost of a smile. Jinwoo appeared in the nursery doorway as Amara was settling Minjun for bed, reading from a Korean picture book she had found on the shelves, her pronunciation probably terrible, but her tone soothing. The small boy was finally relaxing, his eyes drooping with exhaustion, one hand clutching Toki while the other held Amara's fingers. When Minjun finally slept, Amara carefully extracted herself and joined Jinwoo in the hallway, suddenly aware of how exhausted she was, how emotionally draining the day had been. "He spoke more today than he has in 2 months, Jinwoo said quietly, his dark eyes studying her face. "He touched you voluntarily, accepted comfort, ate without extensive coaxing. In 1 day, you have accomplished what 5 professionals could not manage in 6 months. He is not a problem to be solved," Amara replied gently. He is a traumatized child who needs someone to be patient while he learns to feel safe again. The professionals probably try to fix him. I am just trying to be present with him." Something shifted in Jinwoo's expression, a softening that made him look younger, less controlled. "That is why I needed you specifically," he said. "You understand the difference." They stood in the quiet hallway, the estate settling into evening routines around them, and Amara felt the weight of Jinwoo's attention in a way that had nothing to do with employer and employee, something more personal and unsettling. "You should rest," he finally said, stepping back to restore professional distance. "Tomorrow will be equally demanding. If you need anything, there is a call button in your quarters that will bring staff immediately." Over the following weeks, patterns emerged and routines solidified into something approaching normal life, though Amara knew nothing about this household was truly normal. She woke with Minjun each morning, shared breakfast with him in the nursery, spent days playing and reading and slowly, carefully building his trust and encouraging his healing. The child began speaking more, full sentences appearing gradually, his natural curiosity reasserting itself as fear receded. He laughed for the first time 2 weeks in, a genuine delighted sound when Amara made silly faces during lunch, and she had to excuse herself briefly to cry in the bathroom at the beauty of that ordinary childhood moment. But the most unexpected development was Jinwoo's presence in their routines. He returned from whatever business occupied his days in time for dinner, joining them in the nursery, where Amara had insisted on creating a small dining area separate from the formal household meals. He would sit quietly while she engaged Minjun in conversation, while they sang silly songs or discussed picture books, while they built elaborate block towers that Minjun delighted in knocking down. At first, Amara thought he was simply checking on his investment, ensuring she was performing her duties adequately. But as days became weeks, she recognized something else in his presence. He was learning from her, watching how she interacted with his nephew, absorbing her techniques, and trying to apply them in his own careful way. One evening, nearly a month into her employment, Jinwoo asked if he could attempt bedtime routine while Amara supervised. She agreed, curious and supportive, and watched as this powerful, dangerous man tried to navigate the simple intimacy of putting a child to bed. He was terrible at it initially, his movements too formal, his voice too controlled, his entire approach treating the process like a business negotiation rather than a tender ritual. Minjun grew fussy, reaching for Amara, beginning to cry, and Jinwoo's frustration was visible in the tightness of his jaw, the tension in his shoulders. Amara moved to his side, placed a gentle hand on his arm. "Try sitting beside him instead of standing over him. Use a softer voice, like you were telling him a secret. Let him hold your hand if he reaches for it. This is not about efficiency. It is about making him feel safe and loved." Jinwoo looked at her for a long moment, something vulnerable and almost desperate in his dark eyes, then followed her instructions with surprising willingness. He sat on the edge of Minjun's bed, lowered his voice to just above a whisper, began reading the bedtime story with less formality and more warmth. When Minjun's small hand reached out tentatively, Jinwoo took it without hesitation, holding those tiny fingers in his larger hand with obvious care. By the end of the story, Minjun was calm, drowsy, accepting his uncle's presence at bedtime for the first time since his mother's death. Jinwoo sat there even after the child slept, still holding that small hand, his expression unguarded in a way Amara had never seen, grief and love and desperate hope all visible on his face. When he finally stood and joined Amara in the hallway, his voice was rough. "My sister used to read to him every night. I watched them sometimes before. I never tried to learn how because I assumed she would always be there. Now I cannot remember the songs she sang or the voices she used for different characters, and he lost that when I lost her." Amara felt tears prick her eyes at the pain in his voice. "You can create new rituals together," she said gently. "They will not replace what he lost, but they can still be meaningful. He wants to connect with you. He just needs you to meet him where he is." Jinwoo looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You are teaching me to be human again," he said quietly. "I forgot how, after my sister died. I became only cold and controlled and focused on revenge and protection. But watching you with him, learning from you, I remember there is more to protecting someone than eliminating threats. There is care and tenderness and presence." The hallway was very quiet, just the two of them in the dim light, and Amara felt something shift between them, awareness crackling in the space that separated their bodies, a recognition that this was becoming something more than employer and employee, something more complicated and dangerous and real. She should step back, maintain professional boundaries. Remember that Jinwoo was a crime boss who had manipulated her into this position, who ran a criminal empire built on violence and fear. But she also saw the man who sat patiently with his traumatized nephew, who asked her to teach him gentleness, who looked at her like she had given him something he did not know he was missing. She saw complexity and contradiction, danger wrapped around unexpected tenderness, and she found herself drawn to him despite every rational reason to maintain distance. Jinwoo seemed to sense her internal struggle because he stepped back deliberately, restoring professional space between them. "Good night, Miss Thompson. Thank you for today, and for every day since you arrived. You have given us both more than I knew how to ask for." He disappeared down the hallway before Amara could respond, leaving her standing alone, heart racing, wondering when exactly she had stopped seeing him as a dangerous employer and started seeing him as a man she was beginning to care about far more than was wise or safe. She returned to her quarters, looked out at the estate grounds glittering with security lights and hidden cameras, and acknowledged the truth she had been avoiding. This was no longer just a job. Minjun had claimed her heart completely, his healing and happiness becoming her primary purpose. And Jinwoo had somehow, quietly, begun claiming something else, something she was not ready to name but could no longer ignore. She was falling for the dangerous, controlled, impossibly complicated man who had engineered her entire life to bring her into his world, and she had no idea what that would cost her or where it would lead, only that it was already too late to protect herself from the consequences. 6 weeks had passed since Amara moved into the Park estate, and the transformation in Minjun was nothing short of miraculous. The silent, withdrawn child who had sat crying alone in the park now laughed freely, spoke in full sentences, and had even started asking questions about everything from why the sky was blue to where his mother had gone. Those painful inquiries that broke Amara's heart, but also signaled healthy processing of his trauma. He called her Mara now, the affectionate nickname emerging naturally, and he sought her presence constantly, his small hand finding hers throughout the day, his trust in her absolute and beautiful. Jinwoo had become part of their daily rituals in ways that felt both natural and surprising. He joined them for dinner every evening without fail, participated in bedtime routines, read stories with increasing comfort and warmth, and had even started playing with Minjun in the gardens on weekends, chasing his nephew through the carefully maintained landscaping with an abandon that seemed impossible for such a controlled man. The household staff commented quietly that they had never seen their employers so engaged, so present, so almost happy. But as Minjun's 5th birthday approached, the first since his mother's death, the weight of grief and memory became impossible to ignore. Amara found Jinwoo in his private study one evening after Minjun was asleep, surrounded by photographs spread across the dark wood desk, his expression unguarded and devastated in a way she had never witnessed. She hesitated in the doorway, uncertain whether to intrude on such private pain, but he looked up and gestured for her to enter with a small movement of his hand. "I am trying to remember her properly," he said quietly, his voice rough with emotion. "Minjun's birthday is in 3 days, and I want to honor his mother somehow, but I realize I do not know how to talk about her with him. I do not know what stories to share or what memories might comfort rather than hurt." Amara moved to stand beside the desk, looking down at the photographs of a beautiful Korean woman with a warm smile and kind eyes, often pictured with a small baby or toddler version of Minjun, their faces pressed together in obvious love and joy. "Tell me about her," Amara said gently. "Help me understand who she was, so I can help you celebrate her memory with Minjun." Jinwoo was silent for a long moment, his dark eyes fixed on a particular photo of his sister holding newborn Minjun. Then he began speaking in a voice so quiet Amara had to lean closer to hear. "Park Misin was 8 years younger than me, the only girl in our family, and she was everything good and gentle in a world that rewarded neither quality. Our father groomed me from childhood to take over family operations, taught me cold calculation and ruthless strategy, made me into the weapon the Park family needed to survive and dominate in a violent business. But Missin, he tried to keep her separate from all of it, wanted her to have something approaching a normal life. She went to regular schools, had friends outside our world, studied art and literature at UCLA, tried desperately to build an existence that had nothing to do with organized crime. He picked up another photograph, this one showing Missin as a young woman, laughing at something outside the frame, full of life and light. She met a man during her senior year of college, fell in love, got married despite our father's objections that the man was not connected enough, not powerful enough, not useful to family interests. She had Minjun a year later, and I watched her create this beautiful small life, this bubble of normalcy and love that existed somehow alongside our family's darkness. She was a good mother, devoted and tender, the kind of parent who made every moment special and filled with joy. Jinwoo's voice cracked slightly, and he paused, composing himself with visible effort before continuing. The Lee family has been our primary rival for control of Korean organized crime operations in Southern California for 2 generations. We maintain a tense balance, territories divided, certain rules respected, occasional violence, but nothing catastrophic. 6 months ago, negotiations broke down over port access and import routes. The Lee leadership wanted expansion into areas we controlled. I refused. They made threats. I demonstrated our superior position through strategic disruptions of their operations. Standard business in our world. He set down the photograph and picked up another. This one showing Missin and Minjun at a park. The child maybe 3 years old, both of them laughing at something, perfect and happy, and completely unaware of the danger surrounding them. The Lee family discovered that Missin existed, that I had a sister living in Santa Monica with a small child, vulnerable and unprotected because I had been arrogant enough to believe keeping her separate from business meant keeping her safe. They sent a team to her home one evening when her husband was traveling for work. Minjun was there. He was 4 years old. They made it look like a home invasion gone wrong, but we both knew it was a message, a demonstration that the Park family had weaknesses that could be exploited. Amara's hand went to her mouth, horror flooding through her as she imagined that small boy experiencing such violence. I was in Seoul handling expansion negotiations when it happened, Jinwoo continued, his voice now completely devoid of emotion, the flatness more terrible than anger would have been. I was focused on business deals and territory acquisition, too absorbed in empire building to notice that my sister needed protection, that her separation from our world made her a target rather than keeping her safe. By the time I returned to Los Angeles, she was already dead and Minjun was in a hospital, physically unharmed but psychologically shattered. He had hidden in a closet and watched through the slats as they killed his mother. He screamed for hours without making sound, the doctors said, his voice completely gone from the trauma. Jinwoo's hands were shaking slightly, the only visible sign of the emotion he was fighting to contain. I failed my one fundamental responsibility as her older brother. I was supposed to protect her. She trusted that our family's power would keep her safe even while she lived separately from it. And I let her believe that lie because it was convenient for me. Because having her outside the business meant I did not have to worry about her being corrupted or endangered by daily operations. But that separation was exactly what made her vulnerable. I chose wrong, and she died because of it. Minjun lost his mother because I was too focused on power and money to see the real threat. The study was very quiet, just the sound of Jinwoo's ragged breathing and the distant hum of the estate's security systems. Amara felt tears streaming down her face for this broken family, for the woman who had tried so hard to protect her son from violence only to be destroyed by it, for the small boy who had witnessed unspeakable horror, for the man sitting before her who carried guilt that would never fully heal. She reached out slowly, carefully, and placed her hand over his where it rested on the desk, offering comfort through simple touch. Jinwoo looked at their joined hands as if he had never seen such a gesture before, then turned his hand over to grip hers with desperate strength. "You are the first person who has been able to reach him since that night," he said, his voice breaking completely. "The first person he has trusted enough to speak to laugh with, to accept comfort from. You have given him back pieces of himself that I thought were lost forever, and you have given me hope that maybe he can survive what I failed to prevent. I could not save Missin. But maybe through you, I can save him. Amara squeezed his hand gently, her own voice thick with tears. I lost my mother when I was young, she said quietly. She died in a car accident when I was 7, sudden and terrible and completely senseless. My grandmother stepped in and raised me, gave me the same kind of fierce protective love that your sister gave Minjun. That love does not disappear when the person dies. It stays with the child, shapes who they become, gives them foundation to build on. Minjun carries his mother's love inside him. Our job is to help him remember that and honor it while also showing him that new love, new safety, new trust is possible. He can grieve her and still heal. Both can be true. Jinwoo looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch, his dark eyes full of raw emotion and something else, something deeper and more complicated. You speak about sacred responsibility and caring for children with such conviction, he said. That is why I needed you specifically. Not just because Minjun responded to you, but because your integrity cannot be faked or bought. When I investigated you before offering employment, I learned about the family you reported, how you sacrificed your career to protect children who were not even yours. I needed someone whose loyalty would be to Minjun's well-being above everything else, above money, above me, above convenience. Someone who would fight for him the way you fought in that park. You manipulated my entire situation to force me here, Amara said, not accusation but acknowledgement. Yes, Jinwoo agreed without hesitation. I destroyed your other options because I needed you desperate enough to accept employment in a criminal household, to overlook the danger and moral complications because you had no alternative. It was calculated and ruthless and exactly the kind of strategic thinking that makes me effective in my world. But I also knew that you would stay, that you would commit yourself fully once you met Minjun and saw how much he needed you. Because that is who you are fundamentally. I gambled on your character, and I was right. That should make me angry, Amara said quietly. Does it? Jinwoo asked, his thumb moving absently across her knuckles in a gesture that felt intimate and grounding. Amara considered the question honestly, looking at their joined hands, at the photographs of the dead woman scattered across the desk, at the man who had orchestrated her entire life to bring her into his dangerous world. She should be furious at the manipulation, at the loss of agency, at being moved like a chess piece into position. But she thought about Minjun's laughter, his healing, his gradual return to childhood joy. She thought about the sacred trust of caring for traumatized children and how she had been given the chance to make a real difference in one small life. No, she admitted. It makes me sad that you felt manipulation was necessary instead of just asking. But it does not make me angry, because the result is that Minjun is healing and I am exactly where I choose to be. Something shifted in Jinwoo's expression, surprise and relief and growing warmth all visible before he controlled his features back to neutrality. But his grip on her hand did not loosen, and Amara did not pull away, both of them staying connected in the quiet study long past when professional distance should have been restored. The moment was interrupted by Jinwoo's phone vibrating insistently on the desk. He released Amara's hand with obvious reluctance and answered, speaking briefly in Korean, his tone shifting from vulnerable to cold and commanding in seconds. When he ended the call, his expression was grim. My head of security has concerns, he said. There have been unusual activities around the estate perimeter over the past week. Surveillance that is too professional to be random, questions asked about household routines, interest in Minjun's schedule specifically. The Lee family may be aware that he is recovering, that the Park family's vulnerability is healing rather than remaining broken. Fear spiked through Amara's chest, cold and sharp. They would target a child again. They see him as leverage, Jinwoo explained, his voice hard. A traumatized, broken Minjun kept the Park family weakened, distracted by grief and guilt. A healing Minjun represents our family regaining strength and focus. They may attempt to prevent that recovery or use him to force negotiating position. Either way, he is potentially in danger. What are you doing to protect him? Amara demanded, protective instincts flaring hot and fierce. Additional security has been assigned specifically to both of you, Jinwoo said. You will not leave the estate grounds without my explicit approval and armed escort. Minjun's outdoor time will be limited to areas with complete visual coverage. All staff have been revet. We are taking every precaution. You are making his world even smaller, Amara protested. He is finally healing, finally engaging with life again. Locking him down will undo the progress we have made. He needs normal experiences, opportunities to just be a child without constant fear. Jinwoo's expression was implacable. Normal experiences mean dead. I will not risk him to preserve normalcy. He will be protected absolutely, even if that means his world is restricted. I failed to protect his mother. I will not fail him. They stared at each other across the desk, the first real disagreement between them. Both driven by fierce protectiveness of the same small boy, but approaching that protection from completely different philosophies. Before either could continue the argument, Jinwoo's phone buzzed again with a message. He read it, and his jaw tightened visibly. Your grandmother's assisted living facility reported a man asking questions about the granddaughter who visits regularly. The facility staff handled it appropriately and contacted my security immediately, but the inquiry was made. Amara's blood ran cold. They are looking at me too. Anyone connected to this household is a potential vulnerability, Jinwoo confirmed. Your grandmother is being quietly relocated to a more secure facility under an assumed name. Your former employer also received contact from someone asking about your current position and whereabouts. The Lee family is mapping our connections, looking for weak points. This is insane, Amara whispered, the reality of genuine danger crashing over her. I am a nanny. My grandmother is a 78-year-old woman with memory issues. We are not players in your criminal war. Jinwoo moved around the desk to stand directly in front of her, his dark eyes intense and unwavering. You became part of this war the moment you entered my household, the moment you became important to Minjun and to me. I am sorry for that, truly, but it is the reality of my world. Everything I touch becomes either weapon or vulnerability. People I care about become targets. That is the price of power and the curse of my family's business. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face gently with both hands, his touch warm and grounding despite the fear flooding through her. But I protect what is mine absolutely, he said with quiet ferocity. You are safer inside these walls with my resources and my security than you would be anywhere else in Los Angeles. Your grandmother will be protected. Minjun will be guarded. And you, Amara, you will have every measure of safety I can provide, because you have become necessary in ways that go far beyond your job description. Amara's heart hammered against her ribs as she processed his words, the admission embedded in them, the shift from employer to something far more personal and dangerous. She should step back, maintain professional boundaries, remember that this man had manipulated her entire life and was now telling her she was a target in a criminal war she never asked to join. But she also saw the raw emotion in his eyes, the protective fury and the underlying fear that he would fail again, would lose someone else he cared about to violence he could not prevent. She saw the man beneath the crime boss, the one who read bedtime stories to his traumatized nephew and asked her to teach him gentleness, who looked at her like she represented something he had forgotten could exist in his dark world. I trust you to keep us safe, she said quietly, the admission feeling like surrender and choice simultaneously. Jinwoo closed his eyes briefly, his thumbs brushing across her cheekbones in a gesture so tender it made her chest ache. I will, he promised. I will burn everything the Lee family has built before I let them touch you or Minjun. That is not a threat. It is a certainty. Amara stood in his study surrounded by photographs of his dead sister, with danger circling outside the estate walls and her entire life irrevocably changed, and acknowledged the truth she had been avoiding for weeks. She was falling in love with Park Jinwoo, the dangerous crime boss who had engineered her desperation to bring her into his world, who protected with absolute ruthlessness and showed tenderness only to those he claimed as his. It was insane and inappropriate and completely inevitable, and she had no idea how to protect herself from the consequences of caring so deeply for a man whose world was built on violence and whose enemies would not hesitate to destroy anyone he valued. Later that night, alone in her quarters after making sure Minjun was sleeping peacefully, Amara stood at her windows looking out at the estate grounds, at the security lights and hidden cameras and armed guards patrolling in the darkness, and let herself feel the full weight of what she had chosen. This was her life now, this beautiful fortress, this traumatized child, This dangerous man who looked at her like she had saved him rather than the other way around. She had walked into that park with $4,000 and uncertain future. Now she stood in luxury with genuine threats circling, caring desperately for a small boy who needed her, and falling for his uncle, who terrified and captivated her equally. And there was no going back to who she had been before. No path that led away from this world Jinwoo had pulled her into with calculated precision and unexpected tenderness. She could only move forward into whatever came next and trust that the man who had claimed her safety as his responsibility would keep that promise. Even if it meant violence she could not witness and darkness she chose not to see. Because some things mattered more than moral purity, and protecting Minjun, staying in this complicated, dangerous family, was apparently one of them. Minjun's 5th birthday arrived on a Saturday morning bright with California sunshine, and Amara had spent the previous evening transforming the nursery into a celebration space that honored both joy and memory. Photographs of Missin with young Minjun decorated the walls alongside colorful streamers, creating a bridge between grief and healing, acknowledging what was lost while celebrating what remained. The cake was small and perfect, chocolate with fresh strawberries because Minjun had mentioned once that his mother used to make him strawberry treats, and presents were carefully chosen for developmental appropriateness rather than expense, toys that encouraged imagination and creation. Jinwoo had invited a few carefully vetted children of trusted associates, and the small party was everything a 5th birthday should be, filled with laughter and games and the beautiful chaos of children being children. Minjun was radiant, wearing a new outfit and a paper crown Amara had helped him decorate, his smile genuine and frequent, his voice raised in excitement without fear or hesitation. He hugged his uncle spontaneously when opening presents, called Amara over to share every discovery, and seemed for those few hours to simply be a happy child celebrating with people who loved him. Jinwoo watched from the edge of the festivities with an expression Amara had never seen before, something soft and almost peaceful, his dark eyes tracking his nephew's movements with visible contentment. He caught her looking and smiled, a real smile that transformed his severe features, and Amara felt her heart contract with how much she had come to care for this dangerous, complicated man who was trying so hard to be what Minjun needed. But the peace was fragile and temporary, shattered by a phone call that came as the party was winding down, as parents collected their children and Minjun was growing sleepy from excitement and sugar. Jinwoo stepped away to take the call, and when he returned moments later, his expression had gone cold and hard. Every trace of softness vanished behind the controlled mask of the crime boss. He pulled Amara aside while staff supervised the remaining children, his voice low and urgent. The Lee family made formal inquiry through intermediaries about Minjun's current health status and development. They phrased it as polite concern about the Park family heir's well-being, but the message is clear. They know he is recovering. They see it as our family regaining strength rather than a child healing from trauma. What does that mean? Amara asked, though she already knew the answer from the tension radiating through Jinwoo's frame. It means they may act to prevent that recovery or use him as leverage, Jinwoo said flatly. Security is being increased immediately. I want you and Minjun to stay in the nursery wing tonight. Armed guards will be positioned directly outside your doors. The party ended quickly after that, guests ushered out with polite efficiency, and the estate settled into a tense watchfulness that felt like waiting for a storm to break. Amara put Minjun to bed with extra care that evening, singing all his favorite songs, reading his preferred stories twice, holding him close and breathing in his little boy scent of soap and sunshine, trying not to let him sense her fear. Jinwoo came to say goodnight, and for the first time since she had arrived at the estate, he kissed his nephew's forehead with open affection, murmuring something in Korean that made Minjun smile sleepily and whisper back, "I love you too, Uncle Jin." After the child slept, Jinwoo walked Amara to her quarters, 2 bodyguards trailing at a discreet distance. He paused at her door, his dark eyes searching her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. "If anything happens tonight, you stay with Minjun in the panic room accessible from the nursery," he said quietly. "Do not come out for anyone except me personally. Do not trust voices or calls claiming to be security. Wait until I come for you myself." "Nothing is going to happen," Amara said, trying to convince herself as much as him. Jinwoo touched her face gently, his thumb brushing across her cheek in a gesture that had become familiar over the past weeks. I hope you are right, he said softly. But hope is not a strategy. Please, Amara, promise me you will stay safe no matter what you hear. She promised, though her heart hammered with fear at what he was implying, what violence he anticipated, and was prepared to meet with his own ruthless response. The attack came at 2 in the morning, sudden and professional and terrifyingly efficient. Alarms screamed through the estate, piercing sounds that jolted Amara from restless sleep. She was on her feet immediately, racing through the connecting door to the nursery where Minjun was sitting up in bed, eyes wide with terror, screaming for his mother in heartbreaking repetition. Amara scooped him up, grabbing Toki from the bed, and ran for the panic room door that Jinwoo had shown her during her first week, the reinforced entrance hidden behind a bookshelf. 2 bodyguards materialized in the nursery, weapons drawn, faces grim. Safe room now, one barked. Armed team breaching perimeter. Targeting this wing specifically. The panic room was small and windowless, reinforced steel disguised as elegant interior design, stocked with water and supplies and communications equipment. Amara huddled in the corner with Minjun pressed against her chest, the child sobbing uncontrollably, his small body shaking with terror that was clearly triggering memories of his mother's death. She held him tight, one hand covering his ear while pressing his other ear against her chest, and began singing loudly, desperately trying to create a bubble of calm sound to drown out the violence she could hear even through the reinforced walls. Gunfire echoed through the estate, sharp cracks that made her flinch with each report. Men shouting in Korean and English, the sound of running feet and slamming doors. Minjun screamed against her chest, his voice raw and breaking, and Amara sang louder, rocking him, creating rhythm and melody to anchor him through the chaos, tears streaming down her face as she tried to be strong enough for both of them. The moment her hand settled firmly on his back, still singing, Minjun's crying began to slow fractionally, his small hands fisting in her shirt with desperate strength. Amara kept singing, kept rocking, kept being the steady presence he needed even as her own fear threatened to overwhelm her. She became his shield in that moment, not physical but emotional, a wall of safety between him and the violence happening outside their reinforced sanctuary. The gunfire intensified briefly, then stopped with abrupt finality, the silence somehow more terrifying than the noise had been. Amara waited, hard in her throat, Minjun finally quieting against her chest, though his breathing remained rapid and shallow. Time became meaningless in the windowless room. Minutes or hours could have passed before she heard the electronic lock disengaging, the heavy door opening slowly. Amara tensed, ready to fight with her bare hands if necessary to protect Minjun, but it was Jinwoo who appeared in the doorway, and the sight of him made her breath catch. His expensive suit was ruined, jacket torn and stained with dark splatters she recognized as blood, though most of it did not appear to be his. His knuckles were split and raw. There was a hardness in his eyes she had not seen before, something cold and lethal and absolutely unforgiving, the true face of the crime boss beneath the careful control. But when his gaze found her, and Minjun huddled in the corner, that hardness cracked, replaced by visible relief so profound it transformed his expression. "You are safe," he said, his voice rough. "Both of you. It is over." Minjun lifted his head from Amara's chest and reached for his uncle with a desperate sound, and Jinwoo crossed the small space in 2 strides, gathering both of them into his arms despite the blood on his clothes, despite everything. They stayed like that for long moments, the 3 of them connected in the aftermath of violence, breathing together, anchoring each other to safety. "What happened?" Amara finally whispered against his shoulder. "Lee family sent a team," Jinwoo said flatly. 6 men, heavily armed, professional extraction specialists. They breached the perimeter and made it to the nursery hallway before security engaged them. Their target was specifically Minjun. They intended to take him. Amara felt ice flood her veins. "And now, they will never threaten anyone again," Jinwoo said with such cold finality that Amara understood exactly what had happened, what he had done or ordered done to eliminate the threat permanently. She should be horrified. She should be repulsed by the violence, by the casual way he spoke of killing, by the blood on his clothes and the hardness in his eyes. But all she felt was fierce gratitude that he had protected them, that his ruthlessness had stood between her child and men who would have stolen him, that his darkness served this one perfect purpose of keeping Minjun safe. Dawn came slowly, the estate secured and cleaned with professional efficiency that suggested this was far from the first time violence had touched these grounds. Jinwoo showered and changed, met with security and made calls in rapid Korean, his voice never rising above controlled command, but his fury evident in the clipped precision of each word. Amara kept Minjun close throughout the morning, the child clinging to her with renewed desperation, his healing fractured by the night's terror. She sang to him, read to him, held him, and tried not to think about how close they had come to losing everything. Jinwoo found them in the nursery library mid-morning, both of them curled together on the window seat, Minjun finally sleeping from exhaustion against Amara's side. He sat down carefully, his movements betraying soreness from the night's confrontation, and looked at her with an expression that held too many emotions to name. "I am offering you a choice," he said quietly. "I can arrange safe relocation for you and your grandmother, far from Los Angeles, with enough money to start over anywhere you choose. I can find a different caregiver for Minjun, someone qualified who has not been traumatized by violence. I can release you from our contract with full compensation and ensure you are never connected to the Park family again. You would be safe, free, able to rebuild your life without danger." Amara stared at him, understanding the offer and what it cost him to make it. "You want me to leave? I want you to have the choice I took from you when I manipulated your situation," Jinwoo said, his dark eyes intense. "You did not sign up for armed invasions and men trying to steal the child you protect. You deserve the opportunity to walk away from this world if you choose." "And if I choose to stay?" Amara asked, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Something flared in Jinwoo's expression, hope and relief, and something deeper. "Then you stay knowing exactly what this life means, knowing the danger is real and the violence is not abstract. You stay accepting my protection and my world and everything that comes with both." Amara looked down at Minjun sleeping peacefully against her, this small boy who had already lost his mother to violence, who needed stability and love more than he needed safety from a threat that would follow him anywhere regardless of who cared for him. She thought about Jinwoo's vulnerability when he shared his sister's story, the way he learned gentleness to connect with his nephew, how he had placed himself between them and danger without hesitation. "I am staying," she said firmly, "not because I lack options now, but because I choose this. I choose Minjun and his healing. I choose to help you be the guardian he needs. And I choose," she paused, gathering courage, "I choose whatever this is between us that has nothing to do with employment and everything to do with how I feel when you look at me like I am something precious." Jinwoo closed his eyes briefly, his jaw tightening with emotion. "You are precious," he said roughly. "You and Minjun both. You have become necessary to me in ways I did not anticipate and cannot pretend away. But staying means accepting that I will use violence to protect you, that men will die if they threaten what is mine, that my world is fundamentally built on darkness even when I try to create light for you." "Then show me how you plan to end this permanently," Amara demanded. "I cannot raise Minjun in constant fear. We cannot build any kind of life with threats circling. What is your plan to make us safe?" Jinwoo met her gaze steadily. "In 2 weeks, there is a summit meeting in Seoul, leadership from all major Korean organized crime families negotiating territory and trade agreements. I am attending personally. I will make it absolutely clear to Lee family leadership that continuing to pursue Minjun means total war, means I will burn their operations in 3 cities simultaneously, means I will expose their vulnerabilities and destroy everything they have built over generations. Peace through promised annihilation. They will back down because the cost of continuing will be too high. And if they do not back down," Amara pressed, "then I eliminate them completely," Jinwoo said with chilling calm. "I remove their leadership, destabilize their organization, and absorb their territories into Park family control. Either outcome ensures Minjun's safety. Either outcome requires me to be ruthless and violent, and everything you should probably fear. But I will do whatever is necessary to protect my family." He reached out, took her free hand in his thumb brushing across her knuckles in the gesture that had become their connection. "You are my family now, Amara. You and Minjun. I am not asking you to love what I do or approve of my methods. I am only asking you to trust that everything I do serves the purpose of keeping you both safe and creating space where Minjun can heal and you can exist without fear." Amara squeezed his hand, feeling the strength in his grip, the barely controlled emotion in his touch. "I trust you," she said quietly. "I see all of you now, the protector and the destroyer, and I understand they are inseparable. You use darkness to guard light, and I can accept that because you have never lied about what you are or what you will do." Jinwoo pulled her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that felt like a vow, like a claiming, like a promise that transcended words. The three of them sat together in the morning light, Minjun sleeping peacefully between the adults who would burn the world to keep him safe, and Amara understood with perfect clarity that there was no going back from this moment, from this choice, from this dangerous, complicated family she had claimed as her own. Over the following days, the estate transformed into a true fortress. Security tripled, Minjun's outdoor time restricted to completely covered areas, Amara accompanied by armed guards every time she left her wing. Jinwoo postponed all travel until after the Seoul summit, working from his home office, present for every meal and bedtime routine without exception, his protective presence a constant reassuring weight in their daily lives. And Amara watched him prepare for the trip to Korea, watched him become progressively more focused and cold and dangerous as the departure date approached, watched the crime boss emerge fully from behind the mask of the gentle uncle and protective employer. She saw glimpses of the man who could order deaths without hesitation, who commanded fear and respect equally, who had built an empire on calculated ruthlessness. She saw all of it, acknowledged the darkness, and chose to stay anyway, because love was not about finding someone perfect, but about accepting someone completely, shadows and light equally, and she loved Park Jinwoo with a certainty that terrified and empowered her simultaneously. Jinwoo left for Seoul on a Tuesday morning, and the goodbye was harder than Amara had anticipated. Minjun clung to his uncle with desperate strength, making him promise over and over to come back, to be safe, to not leave them. Jinwoo knelt to his nephew's level, cupped the small face in his hands, and spoke with gentle certainty that he would return, that nothing would keep him from coming home to his family. Then he turned to Amara, and something passed between them without words, an understanding and a promise and a recognition of what had grown between them over the past 2 months. He pulled her aside while bodyguards loaded luggage into the waiting car, his dark eyes intense and unwavering. "If something happens to me in Korea," he said quietly, "my security team has instructions to keep you and Minjun protected indefinitely. Financial provisions are already in place, legal guardianship documents prepared. You will both be safe regardless of what happens. Nothing is going to happen to you," Amara said fiercely, gripping his arms. Jinwoo smiled slightly, a sad and beautiful expression. "I am planning to return," he assured her. "But I am also planning for every contingency, because that is who I am. I need you to know that you and Minjun are provided for, that my death would not leave you vulnerable. You matter too much for me to be careless with your future." He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away, and pressed his lips to her forehead in a kiss that felt like a benediction and a vow. "When I come back, things will be different between us," he murmured against her skin. "I will not pretend professionalism anymore. I will claim what I want, if you will have me." Then he was gone, disappearing into the car with his security detail, and Amara stood in the circular drive with Minjun pressed against her side, both of them watching until the vehicle disappeared through the estate gates. The next 3 days were the longest of Amara's life. She maintained routines with Minjun, keeping him busy and engaged, but the child sensed her anxiety and became clingy and fearful, asking constantly when Uncle Jean would return. She received one brief text message each evening, just 3 words. "Still safe. Tomorrow." Nothing more. Nothing to indicate what was happening or whether the summit was going well or whether Jinwoo was walking into the violence he had promised to deliver if negotiation failed. On the 4th morning, Jinwoo returned. Amara heard the cars arriving and rushed to the entrance with Minjun, and what she saw made her heart clench with concern and relief equally. Jinwoo looked exhausted, deep shadows under his eyes, his expensive suit rumpled, and his movements carrying a heaviness that spoke to bone-deep weariness. But he was alive, whole, and when Minjun launched himself into his uncle's arms, Jinwoo caught him and held on tight, his face buried in the child's hair, breathing him in like oxygen after drowning. Over Minjun's head, his dark eyes found Amara, and she saw something there that made her breath catch, a rawness and a need that transcended physical exhaustion. After Minjun was settled with breakfast and cartoons under staff supervision, Jinwoo pulled Amara into his private study and closed the door, sealing them into quiet privacy. He moved to the windows overlooking the estate grounds, silent for a long moment, and when he finally spoke, his voice was rough with emotion and fatigue. The Lee family leadership agreed to terms after I demonstrated the full extent of Park family resources and connections, he said flatly. I arranged for simultaneous disruptions of their operations in Los Angeles, Seattle, and Vancouver. Nothing permanent, nothing catastrophic, just enough to prove we could touch them anywhere at any time. Their drug shipments intercepted, their money transfers frozen, their protection rackets exposed to law enforcement. All happening within the same 6-hour window while we sat across from each other in soul negotiating. Amara waited, sensing there was more, something heavier weighing on him. They understood the message, Jinwoo continued. Continuing to pursue Minjun would mean total war, would mean I would systematically destroy everything they had built over 3 generations. The cost was too high. They agreed to formal cessation of hostilities, guaranteed non-interference with Park family operations, and specifically with Minjun's well-being. The threat is eliminated permanently and completely. That is good news, Amara said carefully. So why do you look like you lost something? Jinwoo turned to face her, and the expression in his eyes made her chest ache. Because to secure that agreement, I had to show them exactly how ruthless I could be, how far I would go, what kind of monster lives beneath the civilized surface. I did things in those 3 days, ordered actions and made demonstrations, that pushed me further into darkness than I have gone since my sister's death. I became the weapon my father trained me to be, cold and calculating and absolutely without mercy. He crossed to where she stood, stopped just close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, close enough to see the shadows in his dark eyes. I kept thinking about you and Minjun while I was there, he said quietly. Kept remembering him laughing at his birthday party, you singing in the safe room, both of you safe in our home. That image was the only thing that kept me human while I did inhuman things. You are my anchor, Amara. You remind me there is more to life than power and revenge and survival. You make me want to be better than what I am, even when being worse is necessary to protect you. Amara reached out, placed both hands on his chest, felt his heart beating fast and hard beneath her palms. I see what you did, she said firmly. I see the darkness and the violence and the ruthlessness. And I also see why you did it, who you protected, what you secured. You used terrible means for a good purpose, and I will not judge you for that. How can you accept this so easily? Jinwoo asked, his voice breaking slightly. How can you look at me knowing what I am capable of and not be afraid, not be repulsed? Because I understand that protecting the people you love sometimes requires doing things that haunt you, Amara said. Because I know you carry the weight of what you do, that it costs you something every time. Because despite everything, you come home and read bedtime stories and learn gentleness and try so hard to be what Minjun needs. You are not just the monster you had to become in Korea. You are also the man who kisses his nephew's forehead and asks me to teach him how to comfort a crying child. Both are real. Both are you. And I. She paused, gathering courage for the admission, I love all of you. Jinwoo's control shattered completely. He pulled her into his arms with desperate strength, one hand cradling the back of her head while the other wrapped around her waist, holding her against him like she was the only solid thing in his collapsing world. His face pressed into her hair, and she felt his shoulders shaking with silent emotion. I told myself I was just protecting you, he said roughly against her ear. Just keeping you safe because I failed my sister and I could not fail again. But that is a lie I cannot maintain anymore. I am keeping you because I am selfish, because you make this dark world bearable, because when I come home and you are here, I feel like maybe I am not entirely a monster. I need you, Amara. Not just for Minjun, though that is important. I need you for me, to remember what it feels like to want something beyond power and control. You are not a monster, Amara said fiercely, pulling back enough to look into his eyes. You are a man doing difficult things in impossible circumstances. You are Minjun's protector and his family. You are the person who gave me safety when I had nothing. You are mine, Jinwoo, as much as I am yours. His dark eyes searched her face with an intensity that stole her breath, and then he was kissing her, deep and claiming and full of all the emotion he usually kept locked behind perfect control. Amara kissed him back with equal fervor, pouring everything she felt into the connection, weeks of growing attachment and fear and desire all expressed through touch and pressure and shared breath. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jinwoo rested his forehead against hers and spoke with quiet finality. You are mine, Amara. I claimed you the moment you stood in that park and scolded me without fear, and I am not letting you go. I will protect you and Minjun with everything I have, every resource, every ruthless method, every piece of darkness I carry. Nothing will touch what is mine. And you are mine, Amara replied, her hands framing his face, thumbs brushing across his sharp cheekbones. All of you, the light and the shadows. I choose this life, this family, this complicated, dangerous man who looks at me like I hung the stars. Forever, Jinwoo said, pulling her close again. Forever, Amara agreed, and felt the words settle into her bones like a promise and a destiny. 3 days later, Jinwoo called Amara to his study in the evening after Minjun was asleep, and the formal way he asked suggested this was not a casual conversation. She entered to find him standing by the windows, backlit by the city lights, and when he turned to face her, his expression was serious but warm. I have a proposal, he said, gesturing for her to sit in one of the leather chairs while he took the one across from her, close enough that their knees almost touched. Amara's heart raced as she waited. I want you to be my wife, Jinwoo said directly, no preamble or romantic build-up, just characteristic bluntness. Not just my partner or Minjun's nanny, but my legal wife, the official matriarch of the Park family. I want to adopt Minjun formally, so he is both of us as parents, so he knows his family is permanent and cannot be taken from him. I want to bind us together legally and publicly so the entire world knows you are under my protection and my devotion. He leaned forward, taking both her hands in his dark eyes intense and unwavering. I am offering you everything I have and everything I am. My name, my resources, my loyalty, my heart such as it is. I will give you a wedding worthy of a queen, adoption papers that make Minjun legally ours, a future built on the foundation of what we have created together. You will be protected absolutely, cherished completely, and loved as fiercely as I am capable of loving. What about the danger? Amara asked. The threats, the violence, the reality of your world. The Lee family threat is eliminated, Jinwoo said firmly. Our marriage will strengthen the Park family's position, show stability and succession planning that makes us less vulnerable to challenge. And anyone who even thinks about threatening my wife or son will understand they are signing their own death warrant. You will be safer as Mrs. Park than you could be anywhere else in the world. Amara looked at this dangerous, complicated, unexpectedly tender man who had manipulated her life to bring her into his orbit and then given her everything she never knew she needed. She thought about Minjun calling her Mara and asking if she would stay forever, about Jinwoo learning to read bedtime stories with warmth instead of formality, about the family they had built from wreckage and trauma and fierce protective love. Yes, she said simply. I will marry you. I will be Minjun's mother officially. I will take your name and your world and build our future together. Jinwoo closed his eyes briefly, relief and joy transforming his features, then pulled her from her chair into his lap, holding her close and pressing kisses to her temple, her cheek, her lips. You have given me more than I deserve, he murmured. You brought light back into our lives when I thought we would live in darkness forever. I will spend the rest of my life ensuring you never regret this choice. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity and planning. Jinwoo arranged for a private wedding ceremony at the estate, small and intimate with only trusted family and associates present. Minjun served as ring bearer and was absolutely delighted, telling anyone who would listen that Amara was becoming his real mother now. That Uncle Jean said so officially. The adoption papers were filed simultaneously with the marriage license, making Minjun legally the son of Park Jinwoo and Amara Thompson Park. giving the child the security of knowing his family was permanent and protected by law, as well as love. Amara's grandmother was moved to a private cottage on the estate grounds, fully staffed with medical care, close enough to visit daily, but maintaining her independence and dignity. The elderly woman cried when Amara brought Minjun to meet her officially as his grandmother, 3 generations of family built from choice and love rather than just blood. If you have ever found love in unexpected places, or built a family from people who chose you rather than were born to you, drop a comment and let me know your story. Sometimes the most beautiful families are the ones we create ourselves. The transformation was complete. Amara had walked into Hancock Park with $4,000 in her account and eviction notices looming, had scolded a stranger for neglecting a crying child, and had somehow ended up here, standing in a fortress estate as the wife of one of the most powerful crime bosses in California and the mother of a healing 5-year-old boy who called her Mara and trusted her absolutely. Jinwoo had shown her his love not through poetry or romantic gestures, but through absolute protection, through eliminating threats before they could touch her, through learning tenderness so he could connect with his nephew, through claiming her publicly and irrevocably as his partner and equal. Minjun thrived with both his parental figures present and committed, his trauma healing gradually but steadily, his laughter becoming frequent, and his trust in the future solidifying with each passing day. He would always carry the memory of his mother, would always grieve what he lost, but he also had new love and new security to build upon. And Amara, she stood beside her husband on their terrace one evening watching Minjun play in the gardens under the watchful eyes of security guards who were no longer frightening, but simply part of their protected world, and felt peace settle into her bones. This dangerous, complicated, absolutely devoted man had engineered her entire life to bring her into his orbit, had destroyed her options to force her choice, and then had given her everything she never knew she needed. She was no longer just surviving, no longer fighting for scraps and struggling against impossible odds. She was standing in power and security, protected by a man who would burn the world to keep her safe, raising a child who called her mother and meant it with his whole heart, building a future that was strange and unconventional and absolutely perfect for who they all were. Jinwoo appeared behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and pulling her back against his chest, his chin resting on her shoulder as they both watched Minjun chase butterflies through the garden. The silent Korean heir she had scolded in that park had become her husband, her partner, her home in this dangerous world. He had shown his love through ruthless protection and tender devotion equally, through giving her Minjun to mother and himself to love, through building a fortress where she could finally feel safe and cherished. She turned in his arms, looked up into those dark eyes that had once seemed so cold and unreadable and now showed her everything, warmth and love and absolute commitment. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" Jinwoo asked, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "For seeing me," Amara said. "For bringing me here, even through manipulation. For giving me this family and this life. For protecting us so fiercely that I can finally breathe without fear." Jinwoo kissed her softly, tenderly, with all the gentleness he had learned from watching her with Minjun. "You saved us first," he replied. "You brought healing and light and love back into our lives. Everything I give you is only returning what you gave us." They stood together in the California evening, their son playing safely nearby, their future secured through power and devotion equally. And Amara knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged, claimed by a dangerous man who loved her with a fierce and uncompromising intensity, raising a beautiful child who deserved all the safety and joy they could provide, building a life that was unconventional and perfect and absolutely theirs.